prefer?
I go by King.
Awesome. Good.
And we're live now. Welcome to the King Connections podcast. And this is your host, King. I'm excited and thrilled to have Fully Humans owner and founder, Kent Frazier, today.
Hi, King. Thanks for having me, my friend. So good to be connected with you.
Sam here. Thank you for being here. One of the things that what I love about the conscious capitalism movement is the fact that everyone I've meet within the conscious capitalism movement are all very great, energetic. I would say people who seem to be enjoying life. And I know it's when you and I got on the call, I just really instantly felt your energy. So you definitely fit that as well.
Oh, thank you. And I can say the exact same for you. I was greeted with a nice warm smile and a big open heart. So thank you, King.
Well, great, great. Well, listen, I have some great questions, or some questions I really want to get, discussions I really want to have with you because your background, I got a chance to read through your website, was very impressed with a lot of things I read on your website, and definitely things that sparked curiosity in me about things you've accomplished in your life. So, one of the first questions I always like to ask individuals as we begin the King Connections podcast: what do you see as your purpose in life?
Mm. I always appreciate this question. Purpose is something that I would say I didn't have for quite some time. I was just kind of going about things based on what I thought I should do. Over time, it's come to be helping to alleviate unnecessary suffering.
Hmm.
Succinctly stated, helping to alleviate unnecessary suffering.
Love that. Love that. Now, one of the things that you have fully human on your hat, you have fully human on your shirt. So, what is fully human, and let us know what is meant by that. I mean, I understand what the two terms mean, but what's your definition of
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question. This naming was a reflection offered by a person that I had worked with as we were working in the HR people practices of an organization, building conscious companies where we really care about human beings in an otherwise profit motive orientation. So as I was coming through a battle of depression, not knowing how I was going to navigate a particular turbulent time in my life, I was calling back to friends and colleagues that I had worked with over time. And I was asking the question, how would you put language to the lasting contribution that we made when we worked together? And this woman paused and she said, Kent, that's such an easy question to answer. You taught us it was perfectly okay to be fully human at work.
Hmm.
And so what that's come to mean for me is how I just relaxed and started crying. I was like, oh, I felt so seen and honored. And it opened up for me an invitation to hold my depression, my anxiety, the mental health challenges I was navigating. Oh, well, that's part of being fully human as well. We're not all just always happy.
Right.
The darker, more challenging parts of a human life also are valid. And so to continue to push away feelings of anxiety or sadness or shame or whatever those uncomfortable feelings are that we all have in a human experience, how do we learn to actually wrap our arms lovingly around those parts of us as well and embrace our own full humanity in ourselves? As we do that, we're much more able to extend that same grace and compassion to other people. So this, for me, has become a mantra in my life, and a way for me to hold my own expression in its totality and offer the same gift to others.
I love that answer, and I love the story behind it because,
Mm.
again, I feel it. Most importantly, as you're talking about it, I can actually feel your passion within that. I can feel how through that discovery you come up with the title, the name, and you building this company, and I would say movement as well. Correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that naming, I would say, came from an early experience that this woman and I had. It was our first week working together. She was reporting to me. I was her new boss. She was in a new job and a new function with a new boss, and I was in a new company. And we were at our first one-on-one, and something emerged in the conversation, and she started to cry. And I noticed she got all embarrassed and started to close down. And I said, what's going on? She's like, oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be crying. And I said, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, you're not allowed to cry at work, was this, code she had been given. And so I asked her, I said, well, okay, so when do you think it's okay to cry? She's like, oh, when I'm by myself, when I'm at home, when no one can see me, going through this rhetoric. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, can I offer you, another possibility to consider? And she's like, sure. And I said, well, what if it's okay to cry whenever you're crying? Because that's just what's happening.
Right.
And so to make, like, if that's what's happening, it's okay because it's what's happening.
Yes.
And she was like, oh, and she just relaxed. And that set the tone for our working relationship, where it was okay for each of us to just be with whatever was emerging in our own experience or in our shared experience. And there was safe space to talk about it.
Wow.
And this is now the work that we do with large technology companies, small companies, individuals, one-on-one, is like, how do we learn to be okay with ourselves and our full humanity, offer that same grace to one another, whether it's in a home context or in a work context or in a neighborhood community context. How do we evolve our ways of being such that we're not committing so much violence against ourselves and one another, as the current human expression, sadly, or gets organized around in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As you were saying that, I'm thinking about Carl Jung's talks about the 4 archetypes.
Exactly.
I was starting off with the athlete, then the warrior, then the statesman, and then eventually the spirit, right? When you move into the point where you realize that you're in this world, but not of this world. And it's within that context that for me, I feel like I've gone through each of those stages. And I'm definitely I should say I'm up to stage 3, the statesman stage at this stage in my life. And I know I have a higher purpose behind what I want to do than just my own agenda. And when you begin to think that way, your thoughts truly transcend to a higher level. When you go beyond just thinking about what I'm going to do, how I'm going to benefit from this, how much money I'm going to make, and you start to think about what impact can I make? How many lives can I change? Who am I going to serve today? So those are the questions I ask myself now, and it forces me to be much more accountable. And that's what really intrigued me about being a part of the conscious capitalism movement, was because when I heard those, and I read, I should say, those 4 principles.
Yes.
I got a chance to see John Mackey in person, him and Raj Soda. They came to DC when he first wrote the book, and they spoke at the National Press Club. And he identified what those 4 core principles were. And to me, it was just like someone speaking my language, for the first time.
So I had the same experience, King, when I first met Raj and John, and decided to help launch Conscious Capitalism Bay Area. Then I launched Conscious Capitalism LA when I moved to LA. Those 4 tenets of having that purpose. So I appreciate your question of, what's that North Star? What's that guiding light that keeps us strong and focused when the inevitable challenges of life come to greet us? Have that stakeholder orientation where it's not just about me maximizing my particular role in that ecosystem, but how do I orient myself in that we context such that we're arriving at solutions and ideas that rise all ships, lift all ships, and create exponential value through the whole ecosystem. And so what kind of cultures do we need to create to support that way of being, and how do we lead? Not from a me orientation, needing to be right, not needing to be liked, needing to control, needing approval, but more from this place of service and the contribution. I love how, in a lot of the indigenous Native American traditions say, what choices and decisions are we making now, and how are they affecting 7 generations in the future?
Absolutely.
It's like we don't have, what's our obligation to steward this gifted life that we have, for those, honoring those that came before us, that gave us a chance to be here.
Absolutely.
And, stewarding what we've been gifted for those that are going to follow after us. This is all very much what the spirit of fully human is today, is who do we have to become in order to embody this more at this time of human history.
It's very interesting that you use the Native American I would say, perspective, ideology of the seven generations. I was just speaking with someone yesterday, and I used the exact same reference because when I realized if you begin to ask yourself that question in your decisions at that time, you're going to do a totally different act. Your behavior is going to be totally different 99% of your time, as,
Absolutely.
as opposed to you just saying, I can deal with the consequences of my actions. So I'm prepared. So let me make this decision. But when you say seven generations beyond me, how should I go about using this capital? How should I go about dating this person? How should I go about approaching this educational opportunity, starting this business, whatever it is you're going to do? If you put it in that framework, it's going to begin to change your behaviors from that framework. And for me, I think it's an excellent way to live by. It's a difficult way to live by based off how we were raised. But I believe that once you become in alignment with yourself, then it becomes the way to live, like learning how to breathe properly. You
No, I
know, we
agree.
we're not taught how to breathe properly, and most people are breathing incorrectly until you learn properly how to breathe. But then when you finally do learn the proper way of breathing, then it becomes natural, right?
I love the link to the breath that you just made. That's right. It's how are we practicing these things? Are we practicing self-serving motives, language, actions? Are we practicing other-oriented? There's Richard Barrett. Do you know Richard Barrett from the Barrett Value Systems? This is a quote that I heard, I think, from my first Conscious Capitalism summit in San Francisco in like 2012, maybe.
Hmm.
The quote was, what Richard offers is, there only exists self-interest. What changes is our definition of self.
Wow.
Right. So I move from my sense of self is my life is just my life and what I get and what I do to, oh, I'm a steward of life. And now I hold myself as part of, equal to, everyone, all of life. And so I
Yes.
start making these different choices and I start seeing things differently and thinking differently and speaking differently and acting differently. The nature of my work shifts, because it's not necessarily all about just me getting promoted and making more money and buying more toys and having more trophies.
Right. Right.
So the quality of our effort shifts.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
what we're mindful of as we're going about our work, this is where I dip into Khalil Gibran's wisdom from the prophet. Work is love made visible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so how do we learn to breathe, learn to love ourselves fully and wholly, point our natural gifts in the direction of something that really calls us powerfully forward, that we might call a purpose, orient with other stakeholders that are along for some same higher cause that we're all rowing on behalf of? And how do we knit collaborative groups of people together so we're leading ourselves into a future that has more grace, compassion, love, kindness, not so much violence, and controlling and dominating, power over, those kinds of things. That's our pursuit.
Same here. As you say that, that reminds me of kind of the mission I'm on right now,
Mm.
which is, you know, I started the co-founded the DC chapter of Conscious Capitalism
Oh, beautiful.
for my conversations with John Mackey and Raj Sisodia. And from there, I met some great folks, individuals who, again, we had no reason for connecting other than the fact that we shared this higher purpose to want to do something that was greater than ourselves, right? And from that grew to my interest. I had been doing real estate investing and development on a very small scale in DC, but then I moved to Baltimore City and I decided, so let me apply those principles of conscious capitalism to real estate development to make sure that all stakeholders benefit and have a higher purpose. I like to say investing with a higher purpose, meaning that understanding the uh, impact that our investment decisions as developers have on the community and making sure the community benefits from that and it actually has a say in that. And then the culture that we create from that. And Baltimore City, of course, is a city that has, you know, over 16,000 blighted properties in this city. So it's neighborhoods, blocks of blighted properties, which is a bad thing. But the good thing is it provides you the opportunity, like a clean canvas, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
where you can come in and redevelop the entire block and create what I believe, what I'm building on, called conscious communities, which
Beautiful.
is to build a community that has a culture, whereas we transcend the typical race tribes that we're living in, the gender tribes that we're living in, the religious tribes we're living in, that society puts us in, and start to look at what's in the best interest of this community, and how can this community thrive from the different connections that we're building within this community, right? And then the fact that now, because we're building it, real estate now can become a catalyst, as it has been, for building wealth. So not only creating a community for home ownership, but how do we leverage the home ownership so that everyone begins to start to put them on a pathway to build wealth, and then start to change generational wealth building from that point forward. So that becomes the model of what conscious community is all about. But what I realized in building that model, the lessons I've learned, the mistakes I've made, is that I can have all those great intentions and plans that I want, but if I don't really understand the true essence of the stakeholders who live in that community, I may want them from a logical standpoint and my passion to change, but if they don't want to change, it's not going to change. So I decided I had to go out and find other folks to build with, from a coaching and consulting framework, to say, I need you all's help to come in and help create a conscious culture first. Then we can create the conscious community, because now the community now has a model to feed itself off of. And that's kind of my approach. That was the kind of pivot I did. So with that being, I wanted to set that context, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you is that I went to your website, and I love your website, first of all, because it just hits you with just honesty. It hits you with love. It hits you with feeling of, if you're a person that's in search of growth, your website communicates that you are a person that has that. And
Mm.
so a person will want to connect with you based off the way your website's laid out. But one of the things, you describe yourself as a transformational coach. So my question now, I set that context to say, as a transformational coach, does a person have to be ready to be transformed? In other words, they have to mentally say, I'll submit to your coaching, or is it you can transform someone who may not necessarily made that commitment or made that statement?
I love the question, King, and I love the way you asked it. Well, will they submit to my coaching, right? Like, so it's like that was one of the hardest uh, moves I had to unlearn. Right, it is this notion, as you know, early in my coaching, it was like, oh, it's my job to fix or change or create some outcome for this person. And I found oftentimes I was more enrolled in the program than the client was. And it's like, well, that's all about me. That has nothing to do with this other person.
Yes.
That's about me wanting to be a good coach, me wanting that person to think I'm a good coach, me wanting to get some outcome for myself so I can call myself a good coach.
Yes.
Right. And so as we move through that and recognize, so your question's spot on. The bias or the realization that I've come to understand is that coaching in the transformational sense happens in the request for coaching. I have to want to develop myself. We all have a way of being in life. We have a way of trying to navigate our own sense of self, and what parts of us are dying off and what parts of us are being reborn. And we have that ongoing relationship, and we have our relationship with our most loved people, our parents, our kids, our partners, our friends, and we've got this relationship with our work. And so if someone is looking to transform something, and those are the three domains I work most frequently in, or the confluence of those three. As a person, as an individual, has wants and desires and needs, has a sense of purpose, has a sense of contribution they want to make, independent of what anyone else wants of them, and independent of what they might do to make a living. So in those three contexts, a person has to look at their position in life and say, the probable and almost certain outcomes, if I continue to move in my life the way I am, aren't something that I want to actually live into. So I'm going to ask for help. So I need to develop myself to actually become an embodied version of a new way of being, because my current way of seeing myself and seeing things and moving through the world and assessing progress isn't getting me the results I want.
Yes.
And I got to stop blaming everyone else as to why I'm not getting the results I want. And I have to actually come to the place where I'm asking to transform my way of being, and I want help in doing that. That's in my experience, the prerequisite for the kind of work I do. Is there has to be a strong enough motive for someone to actually put the right kind of attention, focus, and effort into becoming a new person, a new version of themselves that includes the parts of them that are still serving, that allow the parts of them that got us here. Thank you so much. Like, let's bless and honor the parts of us that got us here.
Right.
And distinguish the parts that aren't going to get us to where we're going in this next chapter, this next season of our life.
And what you just outlaid there is critically important, because if a person does not want to change and want to step out their comfort zone and want to start doing different behaviors on a daily basis, then there's nothing, I've learned the hard way, there's nothing we can do for them, no matter how much we may want to, and that's what I think that is kind of some of the things I see wrong with a lot of the programs nowadays, is because I think they've written from a good intention standpoint, but going back with Sean Covey's book, the 4 Disciplines of Execution, if a person doesn't want to change their behaviors, there's nothing you can do about that, right? And as a coach, you understand that there's nothing worse than trying to coach someone who doesn't want to be coached.
Yeah.
And the energy's off, and just the whole interaction that you're building is not even fulfilling at the end of the day. Because as a coach who is conscious, who really wants to bring forth a transformation in someone, you want that person to be successful. You feed off the success that you see this person having, not the money that's hitting your bank account every single month, right?
Exactly.
So a couple other quick questions I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, please.
That really jumped out at me in reading your website was, you said you are an Ironman finisher. So I just wanted to ask you, what did it feel like from a context of completing the Ironman triathlon from a mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical standpoint?
Oh, I so appreciate this question. Thank you, King. So that episode, or that experience in my life, came about. I was turning 40. I was starting what I would call my midlife crisis, starting to recognize that, I've been in pursuit in my life that's been largely in a way that's self-serving, and trying to establish my career, trying to establish, not saying this in an all judgy way, but we all have to do that. We have to establish agency in the world and demonstrate we can influence, people and things to create outcomes. And so this was a period in my life where I was working too much. I was drinking too much. I was not exercising. And I recalled that once upon a time in my life, I considered myself a healthy, high performance athlete. and so I said, well, I'm turning 40. I'm going to do an Ironman to prove that I'm still an athlete, to prove I'm not an old man, to prove I still got it. And so I just threw that dart. And then I said, okay, I've never been to Europe either, so I'm going to go to Europe. And so I looked at this experience as a way to recommit myself to health, recommit myself to well-being, recommit myself to expanding my horizons and traveling. And then the kicker came. And this is where your question of spiritual intention comes in. I then said, okay, I'm also going to dedicate this experience to 2 of my friends that have passed before their time. Because I know this is going to be an experience. I took a year to train for it. I hired a coach, an individual coach. I joined a training team. So I had one-on-one work, and I had team companionship and camaraderie. And so I dedicated this race to 2 people as my spiritual practice, because I knew I was going to endure pain and hardship and discomfort. And, these 2 friends of mine paid the ultimate sacrifice in their navigating their pain and uncertainty and discomfort. So come race day, so I had all kinds of problems getting there, flight cancellations. They lost my luggage, my bike, my shoes, all the stuff, like everything you could think of was going wrong going up to the race. And then the race started and I get sick in the water because I'm drinking all this salt water and I start vomiting. And so here I am, a half an hour into an all-day race and I'm sick and I have no food in me. And I'm like, how am I actually going to get through this day? And I pulled my goggles up and I considered for a moment stopping and quitting. Everyone would understand. Yeah, there was all this trouble and turmoil getting there. You just got sick. Everyone would understand. And then I heard this voice. Okay, Kent, well, what would Ian and Jody do right now? The two people I dedicate, right? They were literally the angels on either shoulder of mine. And I heard, put your face back in the water and swim and finish the swim and see what happens next. So I finished the swim. All my ideas about my time, how fast I was going to go, like all the egoic stuff completely evaporated. And the day became a commitment to, am I able to endure this day and move through it on behalf of Jody and Ian, who are no longer here. And that meant I went slower on my bicycle. That meant I walked part of the marathon. That means I just humbled up. And I said, I'm just going to finish for my friends. I don't care what my time is. I don't care how good I look. It's not about that anymore. And so I was just burning through layers of self-judgment, criticism, wanting to quit, wanting to stop, pushing through layers of pain, pushing through, right? All of that kind of stuff. And 10, 12 years later now, it still continues to be one of the most transformative experiences of my life, reflecting on it, looking at that as, what I thought was going to be a day race, an Ironman, that, the next 12 years of my life, became an Ironman in ways, becoming a father, taking on bigger jobs, losing a sister-in-law, fostering a niece for a little bit, having depression myself, leaving another marriage, having to learn how to be a single dad to a 1 and 3-year-old, starting a new company. Like these are like, I look back on my Ironman experience today as spiritual grist for the things that I navigate today. Say, okay, I can get through today. And if I have to stop for a little bit, I stop. And if I need water, I take water. And if I need food, I get food. It's
right.
So I appreciate you holding space as I unpack this story. Your question is a profound one. So I appreciate the inquiry.
No, I appreciate you sharing the story. One of the things that, as I began to build connections on LinkedIn, particularly within the conscious groups, whether it's conscious business coaches and consultants or conscious capitalism or impact businesses, I want to learn the person first, right? Because a lot of people ask me, well, is this an interview or is this an onboard call? And it's like, well, before we get to the transactional part of it, let's see if we like each other, right? Let's have a discussion, because if we don't like each other, the transaction is not going to happen.
Exactly.
Or if it's going to happen, it's going to have so many lawyers and everything, legal paperwork that confines how we do it, that it's not going to be enjoyable to us, which takes us away from the whole conscious part of while we engaging in this, what we're talking about. But one of the things I always ask each person is this, because my company's King Connections, based off my name, obviously being King, but also what I realize is that everybody, to build a successful business or a successful life, it's about the people you're connected to. And I define a King connection as an individual who can, based on their social capital, based off their, not just financial capital, but their influence, their tools, their resources, their knowledge, they can impact your life and your business by 10x by just adding you to their inner circle, right? So like, for example, a King connection for me would be Magic Johnson, right? Real estate developer, plus great businessman, plus great figure, positive role model. Every time he walks in the room, his smile is bright. Everybody loves Magic.
Totally. I love Magic.
Yeah. I haven't met a person who doesn't like Magic, right?
And that's how it was. When I met Magic, I had the pleasure of meeting him one time. And he was the same guy.
See,
Right?
exactly.
He's just like, hey, he's like smiling, shaking my right. He's just a beautiful human being.
So my question would be,
Yeah.
who would be a king connection for you? Someone that you would love to meet that's alive that you would say, if I met this person and I built a relationship with them, I know
Yeah.
my life would change as a result.
Yeah. The first person who comes to mind is Brene Brown.
Hmm.
I love Brene Brown. I love what she stands for. I love the way she works with people in understanding, as I was saying at the top of our call, how do we learn to wade into the messier, yuckier parts of ourselves, the shame, the unworthiness, the critic, all those parts, and shine light on them and let them know it's okay to be here. It's part of the human experience. We don't have to hide in shame. We don't have to hide in unworthiness. We don't have to, we're all hardwired for love and connection, so I appreciate the king connection. We're hardwired for that. We're also hardwired for challenge. And so those wirings cross. And it's like in the challenges that we face in our lives, we heal and we move through them in community.
Yes.
So I just want to honor you too. I love the way you're holding your purpose in the world here and building conscious communities. There's such a beautiful story in what you're doing with those parts of town in Baltimore. Like really deep bow, my friend. I love everything about you. This is such a beautiful call. And I'm sorry, I am going to have to cut short. I do have another call starting in about 8 minutes.
I appreciate,
But yeah, this is so great. I would love to rap more with you, chat more. However, yeah, this is so good.
So I'll definitely once we get offline, love to connect with you, set another time to call. But is there any closing thoughts that you want to share our listening audience as far as contact information that you want to share that folks can get in
Oh,
contact with you? Anything that you want to share? It's a thought as well.
oh, thank you. Well, first, I'm just so happy and honored that we connected. So thank you so much for the connection to you and for the invitation to share a little bit and get to know a little bit more about you. So really, thank you there. Second, I would say the invitation is to what does, it's an inquiry for people to reflect on maybe and be with. What does being fully human mean to you personally? What would it mean for you to become more fully yourself? And how might that impact those that you love in your life? And how might that impact your way of being in your work? So, not proffering any advice per se, but inviting folks into a contemplative inquiry that we hold and steward. We don't have the answer. We're all doing our own work on ourselves to be more skillful in all these ways. And so, the invitation that I'll leave people with is to spend some time reflecting on what that means to you personally and to the people you love and how that impacts your work in the world. And if people want to explore that more, you can check out fullyhumanatwork.com. We run cohort-based experiences. We have another one starting in July. Fullyhuman.us is another place people can find us, or kenthfrazier.com. All those are good ways to get in touch.
Well, thank you, Kent. I definitely appreciate the investment of time and energy and sincereness doing this interview. And I look forward to the infinite possibilities that we're going to tap into each other as we continue to grow and cultivate our relationship.
Yes, sir. And I'll consider you a king connection as well, my friend. I'm honored to be in your ecosystem, your universe. Thank you.
Thank you. And you have a blessed and remaining part of your day.
You too, King.
Yeah. Bye.